Welcome to the channel. My name's Dan, also known as the Painter of Chaos, and in today's video we'll be looking at how I painted this Myphitic Blight Hauler. Alright, so here we have the Myphitic Blight Hauler primed in Chaos Black from GW. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a bit of Death Guard Green on my palette. In hindsight, I probably should have primed this with Death Guard Green spray. Would have made this a lot quicker and easier, and I definitely recommend that for yourselves. So with the Death Guard Green on the palette, I'm going to then just put a bit of Rhinox hide, and then I will be mixing that together. And just remember here just to kind of thin the paints a little bit by watering them down slightly. That'll just help with the flow. So I'm just doing now, I'm just kind of mixing things up a little bit. And then ready to apply that to our mini. So I'm just going to go with the flat panels first. Just trying to get nice smooth movements. Trying to be somewhat neat, don't want to be going too messy, but remember metallics have pretty good coverage, so if you do spill over it's not terrible, it's not the end of the world. But yeah, just trying to keep that as neat as possible. But yeah, as you see in a moment, I just essentially ditch this plan and go with pure Death Guard Green. So this is where I got up to with the Rhinox and Death Guard. So I got about half the mini done. But again, it just looks a bit, I don't know if maybe that's because of the Chaos Black primer. I'm just not happy with it. So I'm just going to go pure Death Guard Green to now just save a bit of time. Alright, so that is our layers of Death Guard Green applied to our miniature. I think it took about 3 layers, 3 thin layers, but now we've got a nice solid coat to work from. Alright, so what we're going to do now is we're going to look at dry brushing some Elysian green over the Death Guard Green. So with the dry brushing, just make sure that there's a slight dampness to the tip, but you don't want it too dry, but you do want to get most of the moisture out. Elysian green is a layer paint, but like I said, we're going to dry brush it. So I'll just pop that off. And then I'm just going to dab a tiny bit on the end of the brush, and then I'm going to work that into the paper towel until there's not a lot left in the bristles, and then we're just going to work on the flat panels and just basically give most of the mini a good dry brush, leaving a bit of that Death Guard Green to show through though. So you can see I'm just being very light with it, just trying to get that Elysian green to deposit kind of just on the top bit where I would say most of the light would probably shine. It might take a little bit of time for it to show through, but just be patient with it and it will come on kind of out. Alright, so once that dry brush is done, we're going to take some Ogre camo and we are going to put some of that on the palette, and then we're going to use this to highlight some of the armour. Again, just a little bit of water just to thin it down, make it run a bit smoother. Okay, so we're looking for the sharper edges, and just angle your brush about a 45-degree angle. This edge here is quite nice to start with, and we're just going to run our brush just lightly across it, just catching that raised area, catching that edge, just so we get a bit of a highlight. And just take your time with this, because good highlights really can bring the model out, make it really kind of stand out. And just remember, if your highlight ends up being too thick, you can always go back a stage and use your previous colour just to kind of thin it out a little bit. So we're just putting a little bit of chipping style detail on there, and then just this next ridge. So as you can see already, that's starting to bring out that highlight, adding a bit more definition. Okay, and let's just not forget some of the little details that are already on the model, so some of those like holes in the armour, it's just nice to give them a little bit of a highlight. You try and focus it near the bottom, because again that's kind of where the light would catch. So yeah, this is some start of the highlights. As you can see, it's already kind of looks like making some of those details pop a little bit more on the model. Alright, so now we're adding some Krieg khaki to our Ogre and Camo mix, and this is just to push that highlight even further. This is kind of an optional step. If you don't want to do this, you don't have to. This isn't something maybe you would do on maybe part of your army, maybe not all of it. But the idea behind this is, like I said, just to push those highlights just a little bit more. So we're going to be focusing this on the very sharpest points, just to push that contrast a little bit more. Okay, I've also changed my brush to one with a bit of a thinner tip now, again just to kind of help with that precision. So just on that kind of point at the top of the armour, that's one of the better spots to really start. So I'm just putting that little bit of like that Ogre and Krieg mix there. Also, we're going to use this mix to dab on some of the rivets, again just making them a little bit brighter than the rest of the model. So you can see I'm just taking my time. And the reason why we do the Krieg and the Ogryn mix is it's not as sharp of a transition as if I'd just gone straight to Krieg Kagi. Building those gradual transitions can definitely make the difference. Alright, so now that we've got our base, we've dry brushed, we've done a bit of highlighting, now we're going to add a wash. So we're going to kind of tie everything all together. Essentially add a bit of dulling down to the colours because it's quite bright right now. So this Athonian Camel shade, I did it quite thin to begin with, using Alarming Medium. I'll be honest, you probably would be okay just to go straight from the pot, but it's always good to start out a little bit thinned. That way you kind of see how it behaves, see how it dries, and then go from there. So this one is a shade that we want to put off around the entire model. Don't worry too much about trying to get specifically in the recesses. That's what the next shade's going to be for, but for now, yeah, we'll just kind of dab some in the recesses, but yeah, this is mainly going to be a wash that we're going to put all over it. Okay, so I'm just going to apply this wash everywhere. I'm just going to speed this up a little bit now. Alright, so that was all the Athonian Camo shade on. As you can see, the model looks a little bit different right now. That's because I got a little bit carried away and I did start with the Agrax shade as well. So I kind of made these kind of streak marks and I put it specifically kind of more in the recesses. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just showing you how I kind of applied that Agrax. So kind of focusing it where those recesses are. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to wash the brush, kind of wipe some of the Agrax off, and then I'm going to slowly, kind of slightly feather it out. So what that'll do is it'll fade some of that wash, so you get more of a gradual transition instead of just the Agrax pooling in those recesses. So that's all green, based and layered, highlighted and washed. Now it's time to get onto the gold. So we're going to use Balthazar gold here just to paint in the trim. So now we want to be starting to take our time. Be careful with it because we've put a lot into the green and we don't want to get much of this gold. Well, we don't get any of the gold onto the green armor that we've done. So just small amounts on our brush, we'll thin it with water, and we're going to take our time. This will probably be the most time consuming part of doing the model. As with any Chaos model, trim just takes forever. But the less mistakes we make in terms of accidentally getting any on that green armor, then the quicker it takes. So just working my way through one panel at a time. Nice and methodically. So as you can see, I got quite a lot of the trim done, but there's some areas where I haven't finished it, and truthfully I just got bored. So if you do get bored of doing the trim and want to move on to somewhere else, just do that. So what I did here is actually I started on the skim. So I've used Rakarth flesh here, and this is quite good. It's kind of a pale base paint that is really good for kind of basing, ready for like any kind of contrast or any layers or washes. So that Rakarth flesh is now kind of on most of the fleshy bits, and also I did the bone on the back. So we've got his mandibles, his tongue, his actual fleshy carapace, and the bones all based in Rakarth flesh. As you can see, yeah, just those mandibles there. Oh, and also the little bit underneath the eye, that's did that in Rakarth flesh as well. And what we're going to do is we're going to apply a few different contrast paints over these. So the first contrast paint is going to be Guilliman flesh, and that is going over the main carapace. I'll also be doing it over the mandibles on the front as well. So with contrast paint, it's just important just to keep that paint moving. Try your best not to go over any areas that you've already gone over. I know I did a little bit there. It just avoids some unwanted texture, but if you do go over, try and thin it out more so you're not letting a lot pool. But yeah, I really like Guilliman flesh. It's quite good at quickly getting a nice good flesh tone down that you don't even have to do much with. So yeah, just making sure I get that all over that Rakarth flesh. As you can see, I did it on the other side, but it kind of went out of focus when I did it on the other side, so that's why I showed you mainly there. And as you can see, I've done the Guilliman flesh on the mandibles on the front. We're now going to do some Volupus pink just on that tongue, and then we're going to do skeleton horde on those little bony protrusions. So starting with the Volupus pink, just giving it a good shake. Okay, and like I said, this is going to go directly onto the tongue thing. You can call it a tongue. I also, off camera, I forgot to record it, I added some Volupus pink kind of as a recessed shade into the mandibles on the front, so I kind of watered it down, and you'll see that in a moment. I think it just adds a little bit more texture to that. You can also use Volupus pink here on the back, kind of on some of the veins, some of where the armor meets the flesh, to kind of give an inflamed look, kind of like what you'd use Carabao Crimson for, but I find that the Volupus pink does quite a nice job of it as well. That's the Volupus pink done. Well, for now anyway, for what I recorded. And then onto the skeleton horde. Now skeleton horde's pretty good. With the right base coat, you don't really need to do much with it. but I find I like to kind of shade over it with Agraxa shade as well, just to make it a bit darker. But if you want quite a light bone, then it's usually fine as it is. So we're just putting this over the bony protrusions just at the top, just making sure it fully covers it. Alright, so that is the Gilman flesh with the Volupus pink kind of at the front, just on those mandibles, and as you can see as well at the back we've got the skeleton horde on the bone all done. So I'm pretty happy with how this is looking. So next is the silver metallics. As you can see, I forgot to record them, but we did the teeth at the front, and the eye, and then the flamer as well. Truthfully I recorded this on a different day and I kind of just got stuck into it and I forgot that I was making a video. I know that's terrible, but lesson learned. Everything's fully recorded now. So this is lead belcher, and we use this for all the mechanical parts as well. So you can see all the mechanical bits on the underside, in the tracks, the rings around the flesh. So, and then I added a bit of that Volupus pink just where those veins were, just to kind of make it a little bit more inflamed as well. So apologies again that I didn't record this stage, but it's pretty straightforward. Okay, so as you can see I added some cork onto the base here, again just to kind of get it ready for near the end of it. Now what we're doing here is we're using the Agraxa shade over specifically the armor trim, again trying to get a bit of a shade over that Balthazar gold, letting it just kind of settle a little bit, but we don't want to settle too much, kind of keep it moving. Alright, so now we're doing the Agrax over the skeleton horde. Again, like I said, I just like how it just adds a bit more depth, but you don't necessarily have to do this step. If you're happy with how the skeleton horde looks, yeah, just stick with it. You know, you don't have to follow this exactly. And then we're also going to do Agrax shade over the lead belcher and all the silver bits. Just to give a bit more of a dirty silver, which kind of is a bit more in line with Nurgle and just Death Guard in general. So I'm just applying that Agrax over the flamer, really kind of getting it into the darkest parts. Now I decided to paint this as a flamer that wasn't being used, but I had seen some use. You can always paint it as if it's in use, so like you could always put some oranges, reds, yellows in there, just to make it look like it's about to spew some fire, but I went with just one that's not being used. Now what we're going to do here is we're going to take a bit of Druchii Violet, and while that Agrax shade on that flame is still a bit damp, we're going to apply some Druchii Violet, and we're going to try and blend a little bit of the Agrax and Druchii together. The reason why we're doing this is because it gives a bit more of like a muzzle burn effect, so it'll look as if this is still like hot metal from firing some flames. You can push it further by using a bit of Nuln Oil on the tips, so you get this kind of transition from black to purple to kind of that brown dirty silver. It's really up to you. I just kind of kept it quite simple. So just dabbing it on there. You don't have to be too neat. The more messier it looks, the better. Okay, so now we have the missiles. So what we're going to do here, we're going to use Corax White, because it's kind of a bit of an off-white, it's not like a pure white. Now that works well for missiles, but also it works well because these are in shadow, so it does balance out. It's also it's like a base colour, so it's got good coverage, or at least mine does anyway. So we're just going to take our time just painting in some of the tips of these missiles. Don't worry about trying to reach all the way to the back. Again, this whole part is in like shadow, so just get the very tips done. Alright, so now we're going to apply technical paint, Spirit Stone Red, over the little lens on his gun. This is what I use for the lens on the front. Again, sorry I didn't record that, but you just get it to the bottom and then you drag it over the top, and you just want a nice thick amount on there. Don't worry about being too thin with this, and this shows quite nicely through any metallics as well. Alright, with that Corax dry, we're now going to take some Mephiston Red, and we're going to draw even smaller circles just at the tips of the missiles, just to give them that really kind of stereotypical missile kind of look. Sorry that my camera goes out of focus there again. I'm still getting the hang of filming miniature painting. So yeah, as you can see, nice little red dot. Just take your time with it, just add a few ones here and there. My best advice as well is just to start with a small little dot and then make it bigger. If you go too big straight away, it's going to be much harder to fix, whereas if you start with a tiny dot and then make it larger, it's much easier to control the size that you make the tips of the missiles. Okay, so now I'm just going to put a bit of Sycorax bronze onto our palette, and this is the colour we're going to use to highlight the bronze features of the armour. So we're just going to lightly bring our brush across the sharpest edges. Very similar technique to when we highlighted our Ogren camo. Again, kind of thinking about where the light would reflect off, so, and just kind of the sharpest points as well. And this won't be a very stark highlight. Sycorax bronze with Balthazar gold creates a very subtle highlight. So just take your time, you know, angle your brush like how I have here, just so you can use the side to catch the raised bits. Just makes it a little bit easier. Okay, so now we're going to take some Stormhold Silver and we're going to use this to highlight all our silver metallics. So any areas that were done in Lead Belcher, we're just going to take it to the sharpest edge and we're just going to take our time building up that layer. So again, you're thinking just like the very tips of the teeth, the sharpest edge of the teeth. And once again, this is going to be quite a subtle highlight on the silver compared, like very similar to the Sycorax bronze on the Balthazar gold. Okay, so now on these little boils and pustules, we're going to paint in some Eandon yellow, just to give that kind of infected kind of boil look. I'm doing this over the flesh colour for that effect. You don't really want to like relayer with Rakath because then you get them more like a yellowy orange that you would say maybe for flames. I also painted the tip of the tail in Black Legion. Black Legion has a really nice coverage. So now what I'm going to do is we're going to use some Dawnstone. We're going to use that to highlight that kind of stinger. Again, just being quite light, using the edges of that sculpt. Just taking our time. Okay, so we're coming to near the end of this model, so we're going to use some Nihilakh Oxide Technical, and we're going to put this all over, well not all over, we're going to sporadically place this on a lot of the armour trim, just to give that effect of verdigris. Now less is more with this. You want to do little bits here and there. You don't want to do like any big sections, because then it just starts to look a little bit off. So the more random you can do this, the more it kind of imitates what would happen in real life. Well, I guess as real life as you can for Warhammer. But yeah, just take your time, add little dabs here and there. Like I said, start out less and then build it up. Alright, so that is our Myphitic Blight Hauler completed. As you can see, I've also based it. I used Nurgle's Rock Technical Paint, kind of Dandry Dust and Armageddon Dust to kind of tie everything together. Obviously you just base your minis however you want to, kind of ideally within the same theme as the rest of your army. But yeah, that's the Myphitic Blight Hauler completed. Thank you very much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed the video. As always, please like, subscribe, please do leave any feedback. It is very much appreciated. And thanks again, and see you in the next video. Goodbye.